you have to get out of your body, get into their head, and reorder the information according to the most serious objections that they're going to have, and then neutralize those.
Welcome to Marketing by Design, where you and I learned from our favorite founders and marketers on how they built their success and told their stories by design. I am your host, Andy Milligan. Let's get started. When we're startups, we're just trying to figure things out. We're trying to see what resonates. We're constantly pitching ourselves to people. A lot of times we're having to represent something that doesn't fully exist yet. And that is not easy. So for our startup marketers in the room, I want to introduce you to my friend, Ben Wiener. Ben Wiener has been in VC for over 2 decades, and he's seen hundreds and hundreds of pitches. So this guy knows what works. After going 0 for 27 on his first 27 pitches, he slowly learned what works when it comes to marketing for VCs. Ben is a managing partner over at Jumpspeed VC and the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Fever Pitch. What makes Ben's story uniquely valuable is not just the framework itself or the book. It's the fact that he has been in these rooms and he was once on the other side, failing at this time after time. And he's learned what works on both sides of VC marketing. So that's enough for me. Let's get straight into episode 135 of the podcast with Ben Wiener. But before we do, I want to introduce you to a free resource that I've made just for you startup marketers in the audience. High converting websites, visual swipe file, and Notion is something that I have painstakingly put together over several weeks and months. When you're thinking about redesigning your website, it's hard to know where to start. So what I've done for you is I've taken screenshots and annotations of some of the highest converting websites in B2B. I've compiled them into a Notion doc just for you. You can filter by color scheme, industry, and CTA so that you know you're getting a comparable reference and a great start in place for your next redesign. It's always helpful to start from a place that you know that works. And these are the sections and layouts we're using for our own clients when helping them approach redesigns. That'll be in the first link below, along with all of Ben's information. And I highly encourage you guys to take me up on that. Without further ado, you're listening to Marketing by Design. And this is the one and only Ben Wiener by Design.
I'm currently based in Jerusalem, Israel. We've been living here for 27 years. I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Went to school in New York City. Went to law school at Columbia, which is one of the top law schools in the country. I wanted to be a corporate lawyer or a transactional lawyer for a period of time, but I had a pretty good sense that I wanted to get out of law and use it as a springboard into business, and specifically into doing like transactional business. And that's what I did. So I practiced law for a couple of years. I clerked on the Israeli Supreme Court, which was very cool. That kind of created a pathway for us to try out living in Israel before we actually moved. Practiced corporate law in New York and then in Israel. And then in the late 90s began my journey into startups. So I joined my first, 2-person startup in 1999. And from then on, I was on the business side. I was in a bunch of startups. I was in some big companies, mostly doing what we would call business development or corporate development, like doing the marketing, the outward facing stuff for these companies, trying to, generate business. The venture capital thing happened by accident, and I kind of stumbled into venture capital about 12 years ago, identifying a bit of a renaissance or a resurgence in the local startup community where I live, and felt that there was a mismatch of people seeking capital and available early stage capital for those startups. So I scraped together a little bit of money, developed a very hyper local venture capital fund that invests only in startups in my ecosystem, helped others build and develop that ecosystem. So I consider myself part of a team of ecosystem builders. I don't take credit for it, but I'm happy to, join the merry band of rebels who are, building our ecosystem here locally. I've learned a lot about that, and have generally helped to develop this underdog mentality in our ecosystem that I think also applies to a lot of the startups that I meet and invest in. You're sort of pushing against the grain. So I have a lot of empathy for that journey because I've been doing that for a long time. The venture capital fund is called Jumpspeed Ventures, and I've been privileged to invest in a couple dozen companies, a couple of which have really taken off and done amazing things. And in parallel, I wrote these books. I wrote an initial novel a couple years ago about startup strategy, pitching it in a murder mystery to make it more interesting. And most recently, I wrote Fever Pitch, which hit #1 on Amazon, which is a kind of a teaching tool to teach the framework for the ideal startup pitch through the story of a founder who can't pitch a startup to save his life until he actually needs to pitch a startup to save his life. He gets mixed up with the mafia and lots of other challenges. And it's sort of a fun way to teach something that's very serious.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the mistakes that you made? First of all, great experience, great credibility. You tell your story very well. What are some of the things that maybe when you were the one that was also in the shoes of having to make your own pitch, that maybe some of the mistakes that you made that you see now when you're consulting with a lot of people that come through your VC?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Andy. And my mistakes led me to this journey. So when I was pitching Jump Speed, getting off the ground, I was a little bit older than usual. I was 43, starting a new career, but I was a very serious guy. I was well educated. I thought investors, I had never raised money for a venture capital fund before, but I thought, I know some wealthy people, they'll just throw a little bit of change at me because I'm clearly a serious guy. I'm clearly not going to steal their money. I'm clearly going to work hard. And I was over 27 on my first 27 pitches to high net worth individuals and started to realize there was a big problem when I actually got cursed out twice by investors, by prospective investors. My pitch was so bad. This is coming from the number one author of a book about startup pitching. My pitch was so bad or just so off that two different investors actually resorted to expletives and told me that my pitch was ridiculous. There was so much for me to learn from those interactions. And what it taught me was that sometimes the most amazing pitches or the most amazing opportunities are abrasive, are troublesome, get people upset. And that was actually a good thing. So I was actually on the right track because my pitch was so contrarian that it was getting people upset. The problem was I needed to then anticipate what they were going to get upset about and work that into my pitch so that I could neutralize their objections early and not allow them to linger too long until they just finally called time out and said, this is ridiculous. So I learned a lot about pitching from my first failures and was able to pivot, was humble enough to say, okay, I'm not going to keep banging my head against the wall. I'm going to start to listen to the feedback I'm getting from these investors and what's troubling them, and then work that into the entry of my pitch. And what happened was after a few months, I was in their heads. I would meet with an investor and it was so cool because they would be sort of leaning forward. I'd be talking and anticipating my verbal presentation wasn't the way I wanted to present it. It was the way they were thinking about it. And I was neutralizing their objections as they were hitting their brains. And it's a magical, almost superpower when you can do it. And that applies, I know this podcast is more about marketing, and that applies to any kind of sales, marketing, any experience where you're trying to transmit new information to somebody to get them to take action. You have to step out of your shoes and I mean, this is classic. Everybody knows this, but it's easier to say, it's harder to do. But in your context, you have to get out of your body, get into their head and reorder the information according to the most serious objections that they're going to have, and then neutralize those. So by the time the conversation is midway through, you're in sync with the listener. That's what
Yeah.
I've done in the startup space. That's what I've done with my framework, but that applies to marketing, that applies to sales. And this is as old as time. The greatest, most compelling speakers or leaders are the ones who are able to do this. So I was able to learn how to do that quickly, or to pivot myself and get into the mode of doing that. And once I was able to do that, I was, much more successful in raising capital and was able to get it off the ground and do what I needed to do. But I needed to have a fundamental shift in my attitude in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, there's a special emotion you can captivate, and I think you really capture attention and get your point across a lot better when you don't beat around the bush when it comes to addressing objections. And I understand, like, especially people who are, especially people in the AMA, some of them are they when they position that their offer, a lot of times it comes from a place of not understanding your customer well enough, which is why I love you made that correlation. Um, and there's just natural just beating around the bush, not wanting to be front and center and honest, and people can sniff out BS from a mile away when it comes to you're not telling the full story. You don't understand me well enough to know, like, why is this worth my investment? Why is this worth my time? And there's kind of this misconception I see a lot in the startup space, especially in venture capital, where, okay, venture capital is something where, okay, we're trying to appeal to people who have funds and have money, and they're just going to throw money at it. When in reality, they're probably more closely guarded with their decision on what to invest further in, um, even if they have a lot of capital at their disposal. They are tying a lot of their reputation. They're not just their money; it's their reputation, it's their focus, it's their energy, it's their attention, and those are the things that they value the most. And you have to appeal to that not just in your pitch, but also in the value prop of the company. Um, what are some of the things that you recognize very quickly now when you're hearing a pitch from one of your potential investors or startup founders that you think they get wrong the most often? Is it this thing that we just talked about, or is there a couple more things that you would advise to help them on to really craft a home run pitch?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've tried because I don't consider myself to be so brilliant. I try to condition myself to be somewhat patient and not fall into the traps of judging people too early. I just made an investment in a company now where the first pitch was terrible. And I was able to forgive them for that and listen a little more closely and question them, and then come to a point after a couple meetings where I felt they had learned a lot about what they actually were selling, and it was actually incredibly cool, much cooler than what they were originally presenting, just because they were lost in the details, and that they had learned even in a few weeks or months, they had picked up tools about how to tell the story properly. So one of the pitfalls of what I do, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, venture capitalists are seeing lots and lots of stuff. There's deal flow flying by, and we tend to fall into these traps. We, the investors, we make mistakes of falling into traps of being proud of our ability to pattern match. Sometimes we jump a little bit too early into a no because we see red flags popping up. When really, if we were a little more patient, we might peel back the onion and see the value. I'm mixing a lot of metaphors, but that's what I do. So the short answer is, I think there are some classic mistakes, but you have to have like a 3 strike or 4 strike mentality as an investor. You can't just say no on the first strike, because sometimes they've just slipped or they made a mistake or they're too excited. And if you listen a little more patiently, you'll find out that there's something really amazing there. And that's happened to me a few times. There are some classic mistakes though. I think some classic mistakes are utilizing too much of the meeting to, fire hose out or vomit out all the information. There's this intense pressure when the entrepreneur meets the investor. Some of the less sophisticated ones feel like it's going to a bank, like you're going to get an answer at that first meeting, like a yes or no, we're in or we're out. That rarely happens. So usually it's a first meeting. It's like a first date, and you as the founder, you need to sort of ease the investor into what you already know, or what you've already seen. Take it easy, take it slow, work them through it, and then get another meeting and another 3 meetings before you, or 5, or sometimes 15 until you get the money. So one is to be calm and be patient. Um, I really don't like to make fun of founders. I think the founders are amazing. I worship founders, but there have been some really extreme examples where one founder was actually hyperventilating. He was so nervous that he had to call timeout during the pitch to me and go outside and smoke a cigarette because he was so worked up. And I just felt bad for him. Like, dude, I'm coming in peace. Like, I'm listening carefully. Don't get worked up. I'm going to give you your time. Like, let's just talk it through. So sometimes nerves or agitation or pressure gets to the founder. That can be, sad if that happens. Take a deep breath. It's a conversation. It's a first date. Number two is similarly just utilizing too much of the time to spill out too much information and not leaving enough time. Guy Kawasaki, who's a legend, who actually wrote the foreword to my book, has a famous 10-20-30 rule, and the 10 is 10 slides, the 20 is 20 minutes. And he says, if you have a 1 hour meeting, your presentation should only last 20 minutes, because you want to give, he has a bunch of other humorous reasons for that. But the truth is, you want to give 40 minutes of space in the meeting so that the investor can ask questions, or, we love to show how smart we are by asking really smart questions. Let us do that. Like, shorten the presentation time and leave a lot of time for conversation. again, it's a date. So we want to, the founder wants to encourage the investor to be engaged. I've had some pitches that were an hour long and the founders were just talking for 55, 56 minutes. By the time they took a deep breath, I looked at my watch and said, okay, that's it. The meeting's over. I have another meeting waiting, and I didn't have any time to do follow-up. So I think those are two classic mistakes. Just feeling too much pressure to provide too much information so that the key messages get lost in the flood are probably the two biggest problems. But I don't want to say it from a critical point of view. It's just I appreciate how pressurized this business is. And I would love for founders to know that they don't need to feel so much pressure. Like I know there's a lot riding on it. Take a deep breath, practice the information, think about it from our point of view, present it clearly, succinctly, give us a lot of room and time to follow up with questions. You're not going to cover everything in the first meeting. That mindset I think would help a lot for a lot of first time entrepreneurs that find themselves pitching these nasty, mean, heartless investors
Yeah.
like me.
I think part of it is, first of all, as you go through that, you explain it very well. One thing that points out to me is if there's a lot of emotion attached, and I'm sure you can recognize this. If there's nerves, there's a lot of emotion attached to this pitch that they're getting. It's a very emotional thing to them, and that likely means that they care. Um, I know a lot of startup founders that this is everything for them. And I think part of it is when you invest, you over index in terms of what you're building and how much it means and the impact that these grand visions, your own vision that you're trying to get other people to kind of understand as you're presenting it. I think that you put too much pressure on yourself because you have this huge vision that you're trying to portray in such a short period of time. And they're really trying to compress everything. They view it as like their step up to the plate in the World Series. Like you really have to knock this out of the park, when in reality, it's just another conversation to where you're trying to address objections and continue the conversation likely afterward. You don't have to, sell the whole vision for the future of your company, in this pitch. It's really setting it up. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot too, is like you're not a lot of times you're not really marketing or selling the conversion. You're just selling the next step. You're selling the next conversation. Um, the next, phase in the funnel to where, the ultimate lead to the end result that you want to go. One thing I did want to click on there,
But
can
I would
you
say, I would just,
maybe
but
go
Andy,
ahead.
I would just say though, not sorry to cut you off, but it's really important. I do want to see that passion in the founders. So I don't want, I want them to be calm, but I definitely want them to be passionate. And by the way, when I've invested in a company, I mean, get me wound up about the company I've invested in. I start to get very passionate about it too. In order for me to put my investors' dollars into that company, I have to match the passion and see the passion that they have. I don't want them to dilute the passion. I want them to figure out a way to communicate that passion, but also get right into that they're passionate, but why they're so passionate in a way that I can relate to. So I actually want
Hmm.
to see the passion. It's really, really important. But it has to be this tango or this two-way dance where like I'm incredibly, incredibly passionate about what I'm pitching you, Mr. Investor, but I recognize that you might not know what I already know, or you might not realize what I realize, and I'm going to get you as quickly as possible to the passion that I have. I'm deeply passionate about it. I don't expect you to be as passionate about it, Mr. Investor. And I'm going to take the next 10, 20, 5 minutes, whatever time I have to get you as quickly as possible to an understanding of why I'm so passionate about what I do. That's the perfect pitch. And that's what I've tried to do in my framework to try to give the founder the tools in a very short period of time to say, I believe something that I'm very passionate about. I recognize that you may not believe that yet, or you may not even know what I'm talking about. But in a few minutes, I'm going to hopefully get you closer to the level of passion that I have. That's the perfect pitch. So I'm sorry for cutting you off, but
Hmm.
I just wanted to
No, not at
put a
all.
pin in that passion is absolutely critical. I want the passion without the pressure and the breathless, flood of information. The perfect balance is deep passion, but a measured, easing me into getting me to where your passion is. That's the perfect scenario.
In your
Sorry, go ahead.
framework, no, not at all. And if that's, I say this all the time, if you interrupt, that means you're interested. So it means it's a good conversation. How part Sort of branching off on that, how important is it for founders to do like research on tailoring their pitch to the audience itself? Because I hear that and I think like, okay, I want to see passion. I want to become passionate by what you're talking about. You have to know, and this goes back a little bit to what we were talking about of addressing objections to know that specifically. How important is it that they do their research and that they know one to one who they're talking to when startup founders are giving a pitch?
That's a very, very good question, and it's a little more complicated. The answer might be complicated. So, I think the founders often don't do any research on the investors that they're pitching to and view them all as homogeneous or homogenous or however you pronounce the word. We're like snowflakes. We're very different. And many of us have put out publicly on our websites in an easy way to find like the kinds of things that we're looking for. And it doesn't take a lot of time. I wouldn't want a founder to do, 4 hours of research on me before meeting me, but 4 minutes would be enough to figure out a lot of what I'm looking for and what kind of things I invest in. And it's a shame when, when a founder is pitching an investor on what's probably going to be a multi-year relationship, lots and lots of money, lots and lots of time together. Again, if you're going, I know we live like in the Tinder generation, but where I'm a little bit older, like where I come from, you would spend a little bit of time checking out the person that you wanted to ask on a date before you decided to go on a date with them. I think the same thing holds true for investment. It's not a Tinder. We're not in a Tinder investment world yet. I think we're talking about a long relationship. So take the 4 or 5 minutes, not 4 or 5 hours, but 4 or 5 minutes, just to quickly search that person and see, or their fund, and see what they do. In many cases, founders reach out to me. If they would have taken 2 seconds to look at what I do, they would have known that what they're pitching wasn't relevant for my fund's investment criteria or for my thesis. Not that I don't believe in them. It's just in the wrong place or in the wrong sector or the wrong stage. It would have saved them time. It would have saved me time saying no. So it's worth it to take a little bit of time, but I wouldn't encourage them to take too much time. If I apply it back to my framework, because I'm pitching a framework, the HEART 5-part framework that we'll hopefully talk about, I designed that
Hmm.
to work for almost any investor. Like the point of that framework is almost all of us will think about things in this way. So if you organize your information in this way, even if you don't know much about us individually, you're really likely to neutralize a lot of the main objections that almost any investor is going to have when you start talking. So the framework is designed to streamline that and make it, more uniform, even if you don't know much about the investor. But clearly you're right. Like if you can know a little bit more about them, then you can sprinkle in things, or just avoid the investor if you know that they're not relevant to you. It would save everybody a lot of time.
Yeah, getting in the right rooms and knowing that you're talking to the right people is really important, and just getting traction in the beginning. One thing I want to dive deeper into the framework in each step, sort of unpacking the order of operations in terms of where that occurs. One thing I did want to double click on was there a time, sort of based on your last response, was there ever a time, 'cause I see you as someone, you have kind of the social awareness around, "Okay, I did this whole startup pitching thing wrong, and I can kind of see the forest for the trees, and I can see maybe what's lying under the surface of what these startup ideas are and how the founders are bringing them to life, and maybe this first pitch just wasn't an accurate representation of that. Maybe there's some more meat on the bone." Can you point to a specific time where maybe you gave a second at bat or you gave a second chance, not in that exact language, but you continued the conversation regardless of if the pitch wasn't a home run in the start. You were kind of able to see through that, and maybe a specific story where that manifested itself.
Yeah, it's happened a few times. And it's that magic moment when I took a pitch, that maybe somebody that I trusted introduced me to the startup. And when I looked at their pitch deck before they came into the meeting, I was thinking, I'm just taking this meeting because my close friend said I should really meet these people, but this doesn't look right. But I'll give them a chance. I'll hear them out. And then about midway through the meeting, I just start questioning them, interrupting them. Wait, what do you mean by that? And then at some point, there's like this light bulb moment where I say, wait, are you saying that XYZ. And they're like, yeah, that's what we're saying. I'm like, but that's not in the pitch deck. Like that wasn't in your materials. So that's happened to me a few times. Those are magical when you can pull back the curtain and they themselves didn't fully understand maybe the power of what they were pitching, which is crazy. It's hard to imagine that that could happen, but that's happened to me a few times. I would say the first time that happened to me was very early on in my investment career. I had just started the fund and I thought, I'm just a novice. I'm a bozo. What do I know about this stuff? I'm just going to hopefully get this right. I met a small company called Breezometer. Um, Fast forward, Breezometer was acquired a couple years ago by Google for a couple $100 million. When I met them, they were just two guys or three guys in an idea. They had no money and they pitched me on something that I rejected. And it turned out that a whole bunch of other investors had rejected that pitch. But I questioned them in a way, and I asked for more information in a way that nobody else had asked for, just because I was trying to apply common sense. Just, oh wait, what about this? What about this? And they came out with a different version of it. Without going into details, they presented like one business model, but then when I asked them, they said, "Well, we have this other idea," and I said, "Well, that's much more interesting to me. What do I know? I'm just getting started." That second idea became the business of Breezometer and resulted in the company being acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. So the point I'm trying to make is not that I'm brilliant. I was not smart enough to spot that when they pitched it. They themselves were kind of young and early. They themselves didn't fully grasp the use of the technology they had developed. And just by chance, we got together and worked on the second idea, and that became the business. So sometimes the founders themselves, even though they're deeply passionate about it, don't fully know how to explain what the real magnitude of it is. And sometimes you just get lucky and you kind of stumble upon it together. And those cases are amazing when that happens. And I'm so privileged to be in the room when the light bulb goes on. And on the other extreme, there are founders who completely understand exactly what they're doing. And the flip of your question is, have I ever been in a situation where I heard a quick pitch and was just mesmerized and they nailed it? And yeah, that's happened to me too. And that's amazingly magical too. When you're just in a room with a bunch of founders, one of them opens her mouth. This happened to me a few years ago. 55 founders in a room, each one of them pitching for a minute at a time. One of the founders opens her mouth. I had never met her before. And in 1 minute, 59.9 seconds, puts out the most magical, clear. She was a neuroscientist. She wasn't a natural speaker, not a natural performer. She was a scientist. But in 1 minute, she knew how to explain exactly what she was doing, why it was so important, what was at stake. And it was mesmerizing. And I'm fortunate to have invested in her afterwards. I met with her a few times, and that company's an incredible company. So sometimes they bungle it and you figure it out. Sometimes they completely nail it and it's just amazing. Either way, it's great. But we're humans. We don't always get it right exactly at the first time. Sometimes we do. Most of the time we don't. And a good investor has to be patient enough to try to tease it out and see if there's something deeper there, if the founders aren't getting it right in the first place. My framework is designed for those kind of founders to say to them, here, use these tools. You'll have a better chance of getting bozos like me to pay closer attention and be more engaged and tease out the magic that you already have. I'm just going to give you a way to make that clearer, quicker to somebody like me who's busy and distracted and may not always get it off the bat.
All right. So for a bozo like me too, I want to understand how to understand uh, craft a perfect startup pitch. So say I have no experience, I'm someone who's getting ready to present my pitch for the first time. Take me through the heart framework and how you would explain that to someone who is getting ready to, this is their Super Bowl. They're getting ready to give one of the pitches I've been looking forward to for a long time. Coach me up on that and use your framework to help me.
Okay, so we'll run through it super fast and then we can drill down on any details. And by the way, this is just common sense. It took a lot of research and years of research, but you'll hear it and you'll say, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I hope. Number one, H. The H stands for hypothesis. It really should have been a W, but I couldn't make WEART work, so I had to find another letter. H, hypothesis equals start with why. That's the famous Simon Sinek TED Talk. If anybody hasn't seen it, stop the podcast right now and go watch it. It's one of the most famous TED Talks of all time. Sinek turned it
Finish
into a
the
book called
podcast
Start
and
with
then you
Why.
can go. Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
joking. I'm joking.
yeah.
I'm just a wise guy. I'm sorry. Start with why. Every great leader, every great revolution, every great company started with not what they did and how they did it, but why they wanted to do what they wanted to do. If you want to cause people to take action, to follow you, to buy a product, to invest in your company, if you're marketing, if you're selling, if you're trying to raise money, you're all those things are the same. You're trying to evangelize people to follow you and take action, to buy the air conditioner, to buy the used car, to put dollars into your startup. It's all the same. So start off with why. Why this is the right thing. Why you believe. Cynic in that TED talk uses the word belief or believe over 30 times. And it's very powerful, and that's the right word. So you don't start off with a mission statement. You don't start off with a value statement. You start off with a belief statement. We believe at XYZ company, we believe, or I'm Ben, I believe that. So that's the beginning. H, hypothesis. What do I believe? A belief statement kicks off the pitch. And it's usually something that you believe about the future that other people don't yet believe or don't yet realize. That's the best pitch. You know, the worst, the bad pitches that I hear are ironically, everybody knows that, or everybody's aware that. If everybody knows that, or if everybody believes that, then maybe there's not such a great opportunity because everybody's already there. You ideally you want to start off with, we believe that something is broken or something is not being, acted upon. And it actually is counterintuitive. Maybe people don't actually realize that yet. Maybe you've been to the future, like Mike Maples Jr. talks about. You've been to the future and you're coming back to tell us in the present what you've seen in the future and that we should join you in pursuing that future. So that's H, hypothesis, start with
Interesting.
why.
Okay.
Takes 2 seconds. Every pitch deck should start off with that either that in this, not necessarily in the text of the slide, but when the slide appears on the screen, you look at the investor. And the trick is, sorry to keep beating this point, but I play this trick also with founders in my portfolio. When an investor says, "Oh, you're from XYZ company, what do you do?" That's always the first question. What do you guys do? Don't answer with what you do. Pivot and answer with why you do it. Answer with the why. So, hi, Ben, what do you do? At Jump Street Ventures, I believe that there's a mismatch of supply of capital in my ecosystem. It it's not, and then I get into what I do. I've kicked off with this challenge of what I believe, and I'm trying to get you to
Yeah.
see if you're gonna be willing to believe what I believe. Okay, that's the H, hypothesis. Start with why. 0 out of 10 pitches start with that. It's a ninja move. Number 2, E, enormous stakes. And by the way, pay attention to when we reveal the solution. It's very late. We're building up to the solution. We're not going to talk about what we do for a while. I mean, for a while, it could be 2 minutes, but it's deeper into the presentation. So H, start with why. E, enormous stakes. What's at stake? I believe that the current situation of blank, blank, blank is broken, or I believe that there's this opportunity that's not being capitalized upon. And if somebody were to solve that, there's a lot at stake, a lot of human life, a lot of human suffering, a lot of dollars, a lot of inefficiency, whatever it is, there's a lot of it at stake. We don't even need to know exactly what the number is. That's a big argument. Do I need to know exactly what the market size is or not? We're very early. I may not even know what the market size is, but I can communicate clearly that you understand that there's something really messed up. And if somebody could solve this, they could make a big impact in dollars or in size or in something. That's E, enormous stakes. A, the alternatives are terrible. This is one of the innovative parts of the framework because often people will skip from the problem right to the solution. I would say 10 out of 10 startup pitch deck outlines go problem, solution. I'm saying no, there's an interim step, which is the alternatives are terrible. Before I even tell you what my solution is to this problem or opportunity that I sketched out, let me explain to you all quickly the different ways that people, companies, computers, whoever address this problem or opportunity today and why they all stink. Because again, if you're watching the movie trailer, it would be ridiculous to watch, James Bond or Tom Cruise just running around like a chicken without a head for a minute and a half, and then only at the end reveal who the villain is. But that's what we're doing in our pitch decks. The competition slide is always like slide 7 or 8 or 10. And what happens is, to abuse another metaphor, if we start off at the train station, me and the founder often just takes off like a rocket ship on their train out of the station. And I'm still back at the station wondering, wait a second, you're telling me about your newfangled invention or whatever, but didn't I see 3 companies last week that do the same thing? Or didn't I just have this experience? Or didn't I just read an article with all these other people doing it? So let's address that objection first, because those lingering questions cause a lot of dissonance and a lot of friction when the founder or the entrepreneur or the marketer is talking. And I'm still back at the station saying, I'm not even sure that we need this. I think there's plenty of other stuff that's good enough. So H, start with why. E, enormous stakes. A, alternatives are grossly inadequate. Here's a quick canvassing of all the different ways that people, human, computers, companies have addressed this thing. What's the current state of play? And why is it all inadequate? And then finally, the fourth of the five is the R, the radically differentiated, game-changing hero, James Bond, Tom Cruise. The hero finally comes riding in. Now that we've set it up, the hero has an order of magnitude, game-changing, paradigm-shifting, just totally different solution that is, amazingly able to just neutralize all the inadequacies of the current situation. That's amazing. We highlight not just what it does, but why it's so radically different. The more we can highlight the difference, the more the investor or the listener is going to pay attention, because now we've distanced ourselves from everything else that stinks. And then finally, the T is the traits and skills of the team. Why are me and my band of merry fools, why are we the ones who are the right ones to design, build, and sell this newfangled solution? That's the perfect pitch. That can be done in 1 minute. I've seen it done. It can be done in 3 minutes. It can be expanded into 20 minutes. But that's the heart, the HEART of the perfect pitch. If you bump into an investor in an elevator, that's literally all you need to do from the top floor all the way down to the ground floor. Here's what we believe. There's a lot at stake. The alternatives are terrible. Here's our radical, game-changing, paradigm-shifting solution. And me and my 2 or 3 buddies have these capabilities and abilities, credibility and ability, the subjective and the objective skills to design, build, and sell this thing. Game over. The rest is commentary after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And I was taking notes throughout that. And I think I would encourage the listeners to, even if you're not a startup or you're responsible for marketing a startup, you can take any offer, any campaign through a relative framework like this and really stress test it. Like, I think it forces the inherent nature of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of forces the idea and the packaging of it in the beginning to be the captivating thing that carries it, that causes people to lean in and then hear out the rest of the details of what you want to say. So unpacking your credibility a bit more towards the end, telling people what's at stake, and then closing it in with why are we the right people to go in and solve this for you. I think it's a great framework. I think the analogy speaks for itself as well. I know how hard it is to come up with and like I've gone through the ringer on this too. Like, how do we create like a compelling analogy for like a homepage structure? And it's so hard to do. But no, I think you do it very well and you explain it even better. So kudos there. At each of those, one thing I did want to double click on and unpack for you is at each of these phases, where is the biggest opportunity for leverage? I would imagine, and my guess would be at the H, the hypothesis phase. But where do you think there's a biggest opportunity for leverage to say, if I really focus in on this one, I can drastically improve my responses from investors or just traction around, my startup in general?
I actually think that it's the A. I've thought about this a lot. I
Okay.
think that inserting an analysis of the alternatives before you even tell me what it is that you've invented is such an unbelievable ninja move that investors will be shocked into engagement when they hear that, because it's so uncommon. It's the perfect, you talk about leverage. It's the perfect leverage. It's the perfect distance between what the investor expects and what their brain is actually asking for. Because even investors themselves will often tell you, yeah, we want to see the first slide be the problem and the second slide be the solution, and put your competition slide number 7 or 8. What I'm saying is, and we back this up with research. I did a lot of research on this before I developed the framework. We did an anonymous survey of venture capitalists a couple of years ago, where we asked a bunch of clever questions, and the investors themselves said 2 conflicting things. We asked them, what slide order do you expect in the slide deck? And they all said, almost all said, problem number 1, solution number 2, competition number 7. We asked them a different question. We sort of did it in a vignette and said, you meet somebody and she tells you about something new, and what's your next question? and we ordered the questions. The question that won was not tell me what your solution is, but before that, tell me what the current state of play is and why is it inadequate? That's the way our brains work. So by inserting the discussion of the alternatives before discussing our solution, we've neatly neutralized probably the most pressing objection that investors have. Okay, I'm willing to believe that there's a problem. I'm willing to believe there's an opportunity. Fine. And then the founder goes off on, okay, let me tell you what we're developing. But wait a second. Maybe it's not needed. Maybe there are plenty of other adequate ways in the world where that's being addressed. And what happens is the investor loses attention because they have conflicting inputs. The person speaking at them and telling them about the new thing, but the investor is still trying to process from memory or from analysis all the other ways that that thing is dealt with. So I think the alternatives inadequate, inserting that between the problem or the opportunity and the proposed solution is one of the highest leverage moves that that a founder can do. And it's so engaging when it's done. The investors are just drawn into the logical flow because that's the way their neurons are lighting up. You're as the red flag neurons go up, you're pressing them down through your narrative, and it's a very disarming, very engaging way to be spoken to.
Awesome. I love that. And I like that it was against what my preconceived notions were because I love having those turned down. Um, Talk to me about one thing. I want to get into your head a little bit, sort of on the outside. And this might be a kind of a good place to land the plane and really hone in on your message is say I want to go inside of your head as investor on the other side of it. What do startup founders need to do? How much attention are you paying in terms to their marketing, their brand as a whole before you even hear from them? Think, what are some of the biggest things I need to do if I'm a startup founder, when I'm presenting myself online, my brand collateral, my design, my website, my uh, everything I'm putting out on social media? What do I need to know and have ready for people like Ben and other investors who are going to be researching me and seeing me to really set myself up for success and maybe hit the ground running a little bit when I do make this pitch?
That's a fair question. I don't know if I can speak on that for all investors. Like I said, we're snowflakes. A lot of us are going to view things differently. Um, I will say that there is a benefit. I hate to say it because it almost sounds trite, but we're taught as children, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do. We can't help it. We do. If you have a sloppy website, um, unfortunately, I really hate to admit it, but I may judge you negatively. And it'll be subconscious. I won't be able to say it out loud, but it could be something that lodges in my subconscious and bugs me. And it doesn't mean that a beautiful website, you can't put lipstick on a pig, right? If it's a beautiful website, but the product itself is not needed, it's not going to mean that I'm going to invest. But it could be that there's a balance between not messing up the image and overdoing it. And I think some thought like in my world of pitch decks, people say, how important are the graphics or the design of the pitch deck? And I think it does subconsciously send a message. Like if the founders have produced a pitch deck where the slides are all off kilter and the words are running off the page and everything's in Times Roman font and bright red and bright blue, and it looks like a high school kid did it. um it's going to send a message, I think, to the investor saying, we didn't take the time it's not that hard to make something that looks passable. If we didn't even care what the thing looked like, then maybe we don't care about lots of other things that are more important. And I hate to admit that because it shouldn't be true. We should be looking at the essence of the people and the essence of the product, but a messy, disorganized, branded presentation or appearance can send the wrong message sometimes. And it would be a shame if a founder meets an investor who does think that way and misses out on getting investment from that person just because the presentation was not branded properly. So again, I wouldn't want somebody to spend like you said, to over index. I wouldn't want somebody to spend way too much time on the presentation and branding at the expense of the essence of what they're doing. But in this day and age, with the tools that we have and the experts that we have like you, it's not that hard to find somebody or to find a way to make something that looks decent and just neutralizes that further potential objection of these people are sloppy and don't care about what they're doing. Why should we care about what they're doing? So I think there is a value to presentation, branding at least some basic level. It doesn't need to be gorgeous and it doesn't need to be overdone. I don't need the startup to spend $200,000 on a branding company when they haven't raised any money. But there are tools out there and people out there that can do it for much less and give them a better chance of looking good on that first date.
Yeah, I think something we really resonate on is the order of operations in terms of what's most important. I think a lot of people, especially business owners, a lot of times startup founders too, they get attracted by these shiny objects, and at the end of the day, you realize you're spending your time doing the things that are not directly correlated to the ROI. For them, it's getting in rooms with people like yourself and iterating on these ideas. It's the same thing with marketing. You're putting content out there, you're getting feedback on what is and isn't working so that you can iteratively improve over time. And I think what you shared with us today is a really good framework to use your time when you do get those at bats to use it in the most productive way. And I love the format of your book, the framework to where it's a fiction book. I think that's a unique take on it, and it's a really good hook, kind of like we talked about, to create that lean in moment and to make learning more encouraging. Because I've gone through phases in my life where I have fallen off of reading because I wasn't inherently focused or I wasn't inherently interested in the concept. I think when you position it as a fiction book, that's a really good way to make it more presentable and approachable, something that is this tangible and has a lot of business value, to present it in a way, kind of hide the candy with the vegetables a little bit. But yeah, what I would,
Exactly.
like I said, I see nothing but up and to the right for you, Ben. I really want to thank you for your time. I really value time as I, grow as a startup and learn more, that you guys really value your time. And I appreciate you sharing that with me today. You've taught me a lot, and the audience as well. So where can people find you online, learn more about Fever Pitch, and get in touch with you if they want to take the next step?
Sure. Thank you so much. So you can find information about the book and the framework. They're free materials as well. You don't have to buy the book. The book is a lot of fun. I'd love for people to buy the book, but you can get the materials about the framework of pitching. It's all available at feverpitchbook.com. There are links there to a free playbook on the pitch methodology, a free pitch generator, and also obviously links to purchase the book. The book's available on Amazon and all their online retailers as well. So the book is called Fever Pitch. There are a few Fever pitches, but this is the red, white, and black cover that's about startups. There's one about soccer that if you're looking for startup answers, you're probably not going to find it in that book. Um, and I'd love for people to enjoy the book. The book, I designed it and wrote it not just for entrepreneurs, but also for their loved ones and families and workers at startups. It's meant to give you sort of a look inside the mind of a very well-meaning, but a little bit distracted and misdirected founder, which is really all of us at some points in our lives. We just take this guy, unfortunately, to a pretty wild extreme. But a lot of the seeds of his problems are things that we can all relate to, and I think our loved ones can also relate to how they fit into this crazy life that these amazing entrepreneurs have chosen, which are often very fraught and traumatic. Unfortunately for this guy, it gets a little bit crazier than normal, but that's part of the fun of the book. So I hope that people just have fun reading it in addition to learning something from it. It was meant to enlighten and entertain, and I hope it's so far it's been able to accomplish that from the people that have read it.
Awesome. I'll probably cut it off right after that. But dude, are you doing a lot of you're really like well spoken, articulate. Are you doing a lot of podcasting these days?
I'm doing a bunch. Thankfully, I've had a bunch of interest, and I'm just grateful for anybody that wants to talk to me about it. It was a labor of love. It was something I did, as a side project